And we're live. Hello. Just doing a quick video here, a quick live video, because I wanted to talk a little bit. There was this interesting subject matter on Twitter recently about the purpose of certain dyes. They were talking specifically about the D-force and all that, and that got me thinking. And I just want to share some random thoughts about all this. So I have here my pretty metal dice. Oh, that doesn't focus. There you go. Pretty metal dice. I'm gonna spill them all here. Yeah, this is my Grayed Out Productions dice bag, which is pretty cool. Check his stuff out. Grayed Out Productions. Anyway, that's an unpaid advertisement. I'm just really happy with that dice bag. So they were talking about minimizing your dice set, like the usefulness of each die. And I'm gonna go quickly through the typical dice set, seven dice set from D&D and similar games. So I'm gonna go through that and just let me see if I can put my phone here. That's kind of better. Well, not really. I'll just hold it. I won't be lazy. So just talk about them and talk about the usefulness of dice and all that. So, first of all, the subject matter of that discussion, the D4. D4 is, if we're gonna find a die that's the most useless die, is probably the D4, because first, I mean, they look pretty. Pyramids are cool. However, they don't roll that well. They roll kind of wonky. You have to sort of like spin them in the air. That's, at least that's what I do. Sort of like spin them up in the air, so they sort of like fall like that. And but they're not really that good. Sometimes they're hard to read, and it's just four sides, four numbers. You can easily get this the equivalent with a D8, which is basically two D4s glued together and at the base, or you can even do that with a D12. Yeah, the D12 that nobody likes, the much hated D12. The D12 can actually replace a D4. And the way to do it is easy. For example, with the D8, you just from 1 to 2 is 1, from 3 to 4 is 2, and so forth. With the D12, it's from 1 to 3 equals 1, 4 to 6 equals 2, and so forth. So you can easily replace the D4 with any of those two dice, any of these two, D8 or D12. Now, there's some usefulness to the D4, believe it or not, and not as caltrops like most people say. I mean, they can be an emergency defense system, especially if they're pursuing you. But this type of small dice are good for when you want to bump up the possible number, the average number that you can get. And this can be shown, for example, when you are like healing potions, for example. So you want healing potion to be able to heal, a solid quantity of points, but you don't want that minimum. Maybe you don't want to go too high, but you don't want that minimum to be too low. So, for example, if you had something like, let's say, 6d4 for a potion, that would give you a minimum of 6, of course, to I can't do math. 24 points. Sorry about that. So from 6 to 24 points. So it can get low if you happen to roll all ones, but you still get 6 points of healing, which is not that bad. However, there's another thing that's important here is that as you keep adding dice to a roll, you get this bell-shaped curve. So you start like this when you have 2D whatever, and then 3D whatever goes like that, and 4D whatever goes like that. And let's say this is from the minimum value, well, to the maximum value. So as you keep adding dice and dice and more dice, that curve gets higher. So meaning that the middle numbers in the range, those middle numbers are going to be the ones that are going to be rolled more frequently. So if you have a range from 6 to, like we're saying, 6 to 24, what would be probably you'll be getting a lot of 10, 11, 12, 13 in your rolls because it sort of averages out that way. So that's the usefulness of a small die, that it allows you to roll relatively big numbers without and two characteristics. It doesn't let you go too low with your minimum if you roll all ones, and also it averages things. However, that's also something you have to take into account, that you're averaging those numbers that you're rolling. So that's the D4. The D6 is a classic. D6. I mean, this is people think of dice. People think of dice that's basically what they're thinking of. The D6, and I really can't say much against the D6. I actually wrote a game using D6 only, so I'm kind of biased. I mean, they're accessible. You can get them anywhere. They're cheap, so it is a good solid die to use in a game. However, it can also be replaced by the D12 using math, simple math. If you roll D12 from 1 to 2 equals 1, from 3 to 4 equals 2, 4 to 5, 3, so forth. So other than that, the 6 also has the advantage, of course, of averages, which is the reason why D&D makes you roll for your stats. It was the design was just to get that curve going. So you will have this average, in your stats, you will have the average of, from 10 to 12, because if you roll 3d6, you're bumping that curve in the middle, so you average out over here with it from 10 to 12, maybe 9 and 13, a bit lower. That was an easy way to get some average stats. Of course, you got lucky, then you will roll really high, and then you get 17 and 15, 16, whatever, or really low, the opposite. But anyway, that's basically the reason why we roll 3d6, which in fact, talking about D&D, the stat numbers are not necessary, for real. They're not necessary. You just use the modifier, and I'm gonna get fire for saying that, but it's true. You just need the modifier. The number does nothing other than keep track of where you are in case you're, increasing your stats. So that's the D6. D8. D8 is, well, I think there's nothing I can say about it other than it can replace the D4, and it's used for usually like long swords and stuff like that. This is a very common die used for damage. But other than that, if you think about it, there's not much use to it. Like, it's just like long sword damage or whatever damage, but not much than that. So it sort of takes a little bit of space, and I don't think you can really replace it though with any other die. I'm looking here at the dice I have here and kind of doing math in my head, and you can't really replace the D8. So you're kind of stuck with it to an extent. Can't do much about that. D10. So the D10, or percentile dice, in case you have, this little guy here with the double numbers. The D10 it can be replaced by a D20 using math. Same deal. 1 to 2 equals 1, 2 to 3 equals 2, and so forth. It's very easy math. You can get used to it pretty quickly. So the D10 can be replaced. It's not absolutely necessary to have it. But I mean, other than that, whereas you're rolling percentile, which in D&D I barely remember. I don't even know if there's a reason to roll percentile while you're being a player. So I guess if you have percentile, of course, if you're a game that uses percentile, you gotta have it. But if you don't have a game that uses percentile, then you basically don't need the D10. So we could get rid of this guy. We could easily get rid of it. So, and that of course brings us to the D20. And the D20, I got two of those, advantage, disadvantage. The D20, I guess you can't really replace it because it's split, of course, 20 numbers. So if you turn that into percentages, it's 5% each. So one is 5%, two is 10%, three is 15, and so forth. Another die has that level of fine grain, so it's you can replace it. For example, you cannot replace it with a D10 because these are 10% jumps, and the math just wouldn't work out, and probabilities. And you could not use 2D10 because if you add them up, not as a percentile, but if you, oh, I'll just add them up. No, it doesn't, because first, you're missing the number one from the equation. You can go from 2 to 20 only. And number two, remember the bell we talked about? You'll be going on that bell too, and you'll be tweaking. If you roll a single die, the probabilities of results are linear, totally linear, exactly the same percentage of possibility to get a certain number. As soon as you start adding die, you start getting that bell shape in the middle and starts averaging out. So yeah, no replacement for the D20. So if we have no replacement for the D20, that means that if we're going to do our minimized dice set, the D20 stays. So we have the D20. We're going to put it right here on the side. I'm going to go from the end to back. D12. The D12 that most people say is, like I mentioned before, some people say it's not useful for anything. You can replace a D6 and a D4 with this. So it turns out that the D12 is one of the most useful dice you can have. And also it rolls better than the D6 and the D4. Anything rolls better than the D4. So yeah, so definitely you keep this, you keep the D12. We have D20, D12, and then we have the D10, which if you're gonna do, the D10 it depends. If you're gonna have, if you need percentile, you definitely need them. If you don't have percentile, you can replace it with a D20. So I'm gonna go hardcore here and say that we don't use percentile. We're not gonna be using percentile as players. Therefore, we don't get the D10. We don't need it. So move those to the side. We're done with that. Now, D8. Again, the D8 cannot be replaced easily because, again, you have that you don't have anything that, no other die. You know, I'm doing the quick math here. It's like, yeah, I can't easily replace this with any other die. There's no other die that splits the probabilities in eighths like the, you know, multiples and all that fun stuff in math. So yeah, no. So you have to stick with the D8, which also serves you as a replacement to the D4. D6, we already talked about it. We can replace it with the D12, so you're gone. And D4, I'm sorry, but you're gone too, because we can replace you with the D12. And actually, you could even replace the D4 with a D20 if you think about it. You roll from 1 to 5, that would be 1. From 6 to 10 would be 2, and so forth. So, in the end, all this craziness I'm talking about here, turns out that our minimized dice set is comprised of those 3 dice. D20, D20, D12, and D8. With that, you should be able to cover anything in a D&D game with a little bit of math on the side. And of course, I'm not thinking here about when you need to roll multiple dice of something, blah, blah, blah. Dice are pretty, I love dice, all this stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking to bare minimum. Bare minimum, you can run a D&D game, a D&D character with only those 3 dice. The D20, the D12, and the D8. So yeah, that's all I wanted to ramble about. I thought it was a fun subject matter. And I was thinking, you know, as a game designer, I was thinking of this kind of things related to, you know, dice and probabilities and how all this, right? And next time you're really short on space, you can use just 3 dice. I mean, I don't know any situation that would actually require you to carry 3 dice, but if that came to be something, you just use these 3 dice. So that's it. So for today, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for the people that have been in the live video, in the live stream. Really appreciate your support. And that's it. Until next time, keep those dice rolling.